The Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. Between 1972 and 1973, at least 7 young women vanished while hitchhiking in Sonoma County, California. Their remains were later discovered in rural ravines and creek beds. The predator moved through the fog-shrouded highways of Santa Rosa with cold, calculated precision, stalking vulnerable targets who would never reach their destinations. Maureen Sterling and Yvonne Weber vanished on February 4, 1972, after leaving an ice skating session. The two friends were enjoying a normal winter evening when they decided to hitchhike home. Their remains stayed hidden until December 28th of that same year. Skeletal and bound, they were discarded like trash in a remote spot known only to locals. A terrifying pattern emerged, revealing a killer who knew the local geography of Sonoma County intimately. 19-year-old Kim Wendy Allen was discovered on March 4, 1972. Her body bore clear signs of strangulation following a brutal assault. The killer left her remains by an embankment near a creek, a grim signature that would repeat in future cases. This suggested the killer drove his victims to planned dump sites rather than acting on sudden impulse. Lori Lee Christa, reported as a runaway, was found on December 14, 1972, with a broken neck. The autopsy showed she died from severe force deliberately applied to her neck, ruling out any chance of an accidental fall or a car accident. Carolyn Davis was killed with strychnine poison, her body found on July 31, 1973. Using poison was a shocking departure from the strangulation seen in the earlier attacks, pointing to either a changing tactic or a new killer. Strychnine causes agonizing convulsions before suffocation, meaning she suffered far longer than those who were quickly asphyxiated. Before vanishing, Davis left a note for her mother. "Dear Mom, don't worry too much about me. Love, Carolyn." The last known victim, 23-year-old Teresa Walsh, was found hog-tied and strangled on December 28, 1973. Her body was placed just like the others, with the same signature ropework near a ravine, supporting the theory of a single killer driven by specific, dark rituals rather than simple convenience. In 1979, an unidentified woman was found stuffed in a duffel bag, hog-tied exactly like Walsh. Forensic experts estimated she had been dead for about 3 years, placing her murder right in the middle of the horror. This Jane Doe stayed nameless for decades, her identity remaining one of the case's most frustrating mysteries. Without a name, detectives couldn't track her final hours or link her directly to the other girls. In November 2023, the 1979 Jane Doe was finally identified through DNA as 19-year-old Nanette Suzanne Overacre, who vanished in 1975. The shifting methods, strangulation, poison, blunt force trauma, made it hard to link the crimes, though the tight geographic cluster pointed to one active serial killer. Every victim was found within a 15-mile radius, and all had been hitchhiking when they vanished. Detectives chased down countless suspects over the decades. The infamous Zodiac Killer was briefly considered due to cryptic symbols found near the scenes, though no physical evidence linked his confirmed crimes to the Santa Rosa murders. Even Ted Bundy, who was hunting in the Pacific Northwest at the time, was cleared by solid alibis that placed him in Washington state during the abductions. Arthur Lee Allen, a prime Zodiac suspect living in the nearby Bay Area, faced intense scrutiny but left no physical evidence tying him to these victims. Frederick Manali, Jack Boken, and Jim Morai became persons of interest, with Morai's DNA finally submitted for testing in 2022. Every one of these men lived in or traveled through Sonoma County during those terrifying years, but none could be linked using the sparse forensic evidence saved from 70s-era crime scenes. The motive was likely pure, opportunistic predation. Back then, hitchhiking was completely normal for young people, making them easy targets for a predator. Teen girls walking these roads alone or in pairs had no way of knowing who was pulling over. The killer knew exactly where to hide the bodies, pointing to a local resident or someone who knew the county's dirt roads and hidden creek beds like the back of their hand. A recent HBO documentary raised questions about a suspect named Morkai. Even though these new leads have not led to any arrests, cold case investigators are still testing the evidence as modern DNA technology keeps advancing. But what links these victims to a case where the clues pointed somewhere else entirely? A different direction? The murder of Cheri Jo Bates. On the night of October 30th, 1966, 18-year-old Cheri Jo Bates went to her college library in Riverside, California, just wanting to study. When she walked back to her car later that night, she realized someone had intentionally sabotaged it. The distributor coil was missing, leaving the engine completely dead. This cruel trap kept her stuck in the dark lot, while her killer waited quietly between the cars. What happened next showed that she fought like hell to survive. The crime scene was covered in clues, including torn hair, skin under her nails, and deep defensive cuts on her arms. The autopsy revealed brutal stab and slash wounds to her chest and neck, proving she fought him off for several agonizing minutes. Nearby, police discovered a broken Timex watch. Its face was shattered and the strap torn, likely ripped right off the killer's wrist during the struggle. Detectives also found a shoe print size 8 to 10 and several fingerprints on the car's door handles. Why her? The motive remained a total mystery. It wasn't a robbery. Her schoolbooks, purse, and other valuables were left completely untouched. There was no evidence of sexual assault either, ruling out the typical motives behind these kinds of brutal crimes. Then, months later, chilling letters arrived at the police station and the local newspaper, with the writer confessing to the murder, claiming he did it because she had rejected him. One letter chillingly declared he was making her pay for the brush-offs. "It is about time for you to die." But these letters were eventually exposed as fakes, pointing away from the prime suspect, Ross Sullivan, who worked at the library and knew that parking lot well, quickly becoming a key suspect. His bizarre behavior after the murder immediately made detectives suspicious, as he missed work for no reason and matched the killer's physical description. Years later, amateur sleuths named Gary Francis Post as the killer, linking him to both Bates and the Zodiac. But the Riverside police dismissed this completely, stating there is zero physical evidence to support it. Still, the theory that the Zodiac killer was behind this remains a massive debate today. Handwriting experts even found striking similarities between the Bates letters and actual Zodiac mail, especially in how the dark threats were written. A dark poem called The Confession was sent to police, containing creepy details about the crime scene that only the killer would know. In 2021, police revealed that DNA on those 1967 letters belonged to a man who confessed it was just a teenage prank, proving they did not come from the real killer. This proved the letters were completely unrelated to the murder, but it brought detectives no closer to finding the true killer and left police wondering why someone would falsely confess to such a crime. Yet, the evidence kept since 1966 could still solve this. The hair, the skin under her nails, and that broken watch all hold genetic clues that can still be analyzed with modern DNA extraction and sequencing methods were unavailable during the original probe. The fingerprints lifted from the crime scene remain unmatched in any database, suggesting the killer either had no prior record or successfully avoided later arrests requiring fingerprints. The next case would unfold under strange circumstances, leaving more questions than answers. Mitrice Richardson. On September 17, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice Richardson began acting strangely at a Malibu restaurant. Staff noticed she seemed disoriented, making strange comments that alarmed other diners by talking about completely unrelated things. When the dinner was over, Richardson was unable to pay her bill, prompting the restaurant management to call local law enforcement. Police arrested Richardson for the unpaid bill and uncovered illicit substances in her possession during booking. They drove her to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station for processing while authorities figured out the official charges. Right around midnight, deputies released Richardson without her car, her cell phone, or her purse, which all stayed locked in impound. Despite her obvious confusion and the late hour, no one arranged a safe ride or shelter for her. Releasing her alone into a dark, unfamiliar area would soon spark massive public outrage and severe legal battles. Richardson stepped out of the station and walked directly into the dark Santa Monica Mountains. The rugged terrain featured steep cliffs, dense brush, and almost no houses. Hours later, a homeowner in the Contaminated area reported spotting Richardson wandering through their backyard. She seemed lost, trying to find her way through the property. That brief sighting was the very last time anyone saw her alive. Almost 11 months passed before her remains were finally discovered on August 9, 2010. found in a remote section of Dark Canyon by rangers tracking illegal marijuana farms. The site was about 6 miles from the station where she was released, deep in rough terrain that demanded massive effort to reach on foot. Her body was completely unclothed and in an advanced state of decay, mummified naturally by the dry canyon air thanks to low humidity and very little insect activity around her. The advanced decomposition of her remains complicated forensic work, as severe tissue decay ruled out normal toxicology tests and injury assessments. The coroner was unable to determine a clear cause of death from the bones and degraded tissue. While the Los Angeles County coroner officially ruled the cause undetermined, deputies moving her remains without the coroner present severely compromised the crime scene, which led to a legal settlement with the family over the botched investigation. Her missing clothes and the isolated location raised disturbing questions about how she got there and what happened during those 11 unaccounted months in the wilderness. Her family immediately rejected the official narrative, and her father, Michael Richardson, voiced his belief that she had been taken by force, asserting she was taken there against her will, tortured, and then killed once they were done with her. They filed a civil lawsuit against Los Angeles County, accusing them of reckless release procedures that endangered her and failing to properly investigate when she first disappeared. The case ended in a cash settlement with no admission of guilt, and no deputies ever faced criminal charges. A major break came when investigative journalists flagged a man named Rick Forsberg as a potential suspect through intense database research. Forsberg had a history of property crimes and lived in the Montenegro area right when Richardson went missing, putting him very close to where she was last seen and where she was found. A search of Forsberg's old hideout uncovered women's clothes and other personal items nearby, but the decayed material made a definitive link to Richardson impossible to prove. However, in 2019, Forsberg died before detectives could question him or file charges, erasing any chance of a confession or DNA match. What actually drove Richardson's tragic fate remains a mystery. Some investigators theorized that her fragile mental state, potentially clouded by an undiagnosed bipolar condition she had never disclosed, drove her to wander into the unforgiving wilderness, where she eventually died from exposure. But her family and private investigators believe otherwise, insisting she crossed paths with someone dangerous after her release. This killer, maybe Forsberg or some other stranger, preyed on her disoriented state. Unfortunately, the severe decomposition of her remains left forensics with zero clues to settle the debate. A $20,000 reward still stands to solve this case. But decades earlier, inside another Hollywood home, detectives found more clues but far less clarity regarding Georgette Bauerdorf. On the morning of October 12, 1944, neighbors in a West Hollywood apartment complex found 20-year-old Georgette Bauerdorf dead in her bathtub. A large bandage had been shoved deep down her throat, suffocating her, and the chaotic scene made it clear she fought violently before she died. Her body was covered in defensive wounds, with deep bruising marking her arms and hands, proving she fought her attacker with everything she had before finally being overpowered. Strangely, the bedroom nightlight had been intentionally unscrewed. This meant the killer wanted complete darkness to hide his face, showing planning and clear knowledge of her home. Georgette came from a wealthy oil family with massive fortunes in Texas and California, living alone in West Hollywood while volunteering as a hostess at the famous Hollywood Canteen, a popular servicemen's club packed with military personnel during World War II. It was a lively hotspot where soldiers could dance, unwind, and mingle with movie stars before heading off to war. Here, car was found dumped a few blocks away, and detectives quickly realized the interior showed clear signs of a panicked escape, with the driver's door left wide open and the keys still dangling. How the vehicle was parked and the killer's exit path strongly suggested someone who knew the local back streets well enough to make a fast getaway without running into police patrols on the main roads. A neighbor actually heard Georgette's terrified screams crying out, "Stop! Stop! You're killing me!" late that night, but didn't call the police, thinking it was just a typical lover's quarrel between neighbors instead of a brutal murder in progress. That tragic delay likely cost Georgette her last chance of survival, when help could have saved her. Those screams allowed investigators to pinpoint the attack to somewhere between 10:30 and 11:15 that night. It looked like a savage assault that quickly spun out of the attacker's control, as the medical examiner confirmed the beating happened prior to her final suffocation. Robbery was ruled out immediately, since her expensive family jewelry and valuable personal items were left completely untouched inside her home. The autopsy verified the brutal attack came first, and the bandage meant to muzzle Georgette became the murder weapon when shoved too deep down her throat. The unscrewed bulb and the break-in through her window proved this was a planned trap, not a random crime, implying the killer had watched her movements closely, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Police quickly focused their search on soldiers from the canteen, where Georgette had danced with dozens of men during her volunteer shifts. Detectives compiled extensive lists of soldiers who had shown unusual interest in Georgette or repeatedly asked her to dance. Witnesses recalled a tall soldier loitering near her building multiple times in the weeks leading up to the murder, seemingly watching the entrance and tracking who came and went. Despite questioning hundreds of soldiers and canteen visitors across Los Angeles, detectives never identified this mysterious shadow. Cosmo Volpe, a soldier who knew Georgette from the canteen, the suspect underwent intense questioning, but a solid alibi cleared him, proving he was back at his barracks when the attack occurred. A few men, including Jeremiah John Reed, who was often called Jack Anderson Wilson in Theories, gave false confessions, but investigators kept their eyes locked on a soldier named Gordon Lee Carter, whose bizarre behavior and pawned items drew heavy scrutiny before detectives finally ruled him out. Detectives quickly found that Sumter's statements had major errors regarding the apartment's layout, the position of Bauerdorf's body, and key crime scene details that police kept strictly hidden from the public. No physical evidence or witness testimony could place him in California, making his confession impossible to prove. The formal inquest into Bauerdorf's passing ruled her death a homicide by an unknown killer. Before long, the case went cold under intense external pressure to wrap it up, with historians pointing to wartime sensitivities and the wealthy Bauerdorf family's massive influence as key reasons. The hunt for suspects simply faded away. Decades later, Internet sleuths tried linking the murder to the famous Black Dahlia case 3 years later. But no real forensic evidence supported those theories, outside of a few basic similarities between the victims. Next, we step into an equally complicated mystery involving Hollywood royalty, Bonny Lee Bakley. On the night of May 4th, 2001, 44-year-old Bonny Lee Bakley was found dying inside a car parked near Vitello's restaurant in Studio City, California. She had been eating dinner with her husband, famous actor Robert Blake, just moments before. Blake claimed he had run back inside the restaurant to grab a gun he legally carried for protection, only to find his wife bleeding when he got back. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, but she was soon pronounced dead from gunshot wounds to her head and shoulder. Bakley had a long history of running financial schemes that targeted lonely men through personal ads, which became central to the murder case. She dated multiple wealthy men at once, including Christian Brando, the son of movie icon Marlon Brando. When Bakley got pregnant, a DNA test proved Robert Blake was the father, forcing them into a hasty marriage. Blake was reportedly miserable, seeing the marriage as a trapped obligation rather than a loving union. In April 2002, prosecutors arrested Blake, charging him with hiring hitmen to kill his wife. At trial, 2 stuntmen swore Blake had asked them to help get rid of her. But defense lawyers tore their stories apart, pointing out massive contradictions and reasons they might lie under oath. The state's case relied heavily on flimsy circumstantial evidence and witnesses, with zero physical forensics to tie Blake to the actual trigger. In March 2005, the jury found Blake not guilty, ruling that prosecutors simply failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Yet, a later civil trial found Blake responsible for his wife's wrongful death, resulting in a $30 million judgment, which an appeals court later reduced to $15 million. This strange split verdict, not guilty in one court, liable in another, remains a massive legal paradox. Interestingly, Christian Brando had already made terrifying threats toward her, telling her, "You're lucky somebody ain't out there to put a bullet in your head," on a recorded phone call. Detectives thoroughly checked Brando's alibi, but found nothing placing him near the murder scene that night. To this day, forensic evidence has failed to identify the person who actually pulled the trigger. The murder weapon was eventually found in a dumpster near Blake's home, but ballistic tests could not link the gun to Blake or anyone else. So we are left with a case that remains criminally unsolved, with no one ever convicted of the act. Another case of Hollywood stardom soon presented investigators with equally baffling conflicting clues. Natalie Wood. On November 29, 1981, the beloved actress was found dead off Santa Catalina Island, California. She had been cruising on a yacht named Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, co-star Christopher Walken, and the ship captain Dennis Davern. The Los Angeles County coroner originally ruled her death an accidental drowning, with intoxication as a contributing factor. Yet exactly how she ended up in the ocean was unclear, thanks to clashing stories from those on board. Wood had a well-documented terror of deep water, rooted in childhood experiences and dark prophecies. This deep, lifelong fear made her step into the dark ocean late at night seem completely out of character. The autopsy revealed deep bruises and scrapes all over Wood's body, injuries that did not look like a simple fall from the deck. These marks raised sharp questions about what happened right before she went overboard. Wagner and Walken admitted they had gotten into a tense, heated argument earlier that fateful night, though both insisted the fight was strictly verbal and never turned violent. But Captain Davern later claimed he heard a far more intense clash than first reported, even though his shifting stories over the decades made his credibility highly questionable. Searchers found the yacht's inflatable dinghy drifting near the spot where they recovered her body, raising theories that she might have tried to tie it up or board it before drowning. In 2011, detectives officially reopened the case, labeling it suspicious instead of a simple accident. This shift came from a better understanding of the forensic evidence, specifically those bruises which pointed to a potential physical struggle before she went under. In 2018, police named Wagner a person of interest when fresh witnesses, including Captain Dennis Davern, came forward with new stories of a fierce, angry fight on deck right before she vanished. In May 2022, the sheriff's department announced they had run out of active leads, and the case went cold. Still, they made it clear that Robert Wagner is not cleared, remaining a key person of interest, though her official cause of death is still listed as drowning and undetermined factors. This cautious phrasing highlighted the mystery surrounding the moments before she went overboard. Theories range from an accidental slip while securing the boat to her plunging into the dark water in extreme panic, or even darker theories of a physical fight on deck. Because no eyewitnesses actually saw her fall, we might never know the real truth. The physical clues, from bruises to alcohol levels, can support almost any theory. The file stays open, her death officially ruled undetermined rather than a clear accident or homicide. If you love exploring these dark, unsolved mysteries with us, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications now. This pattern of mystery and tragedy reached far beyond the bright lights of Hollywood. Georgette Moses. On August 13, 1997, the young girl was last seen leaving a Santa Rosa gas station with an unidentified man. Her body was discovered on August 22, 1997, hidden under trees near a busy highway off-ramp. She had lain there for about a week before a passing driver spotted her. The autopsy later revealed the cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation. Her unclothed, badly decomposed body made it incredibly difficult for police to gather any physical clues. The young girl lived in tough conditions, caring for her family because of her mother's severe mental health struggles. But those family struggles did not make her death any less tragic. Instead, it exposed the tragic vulnerability that drew her right into a killer's path. That gas station, her final known stop, quickly became ground zero for the police investigation. Relying on grainy security footage and sparse witness accounts as their only real leads, detectives pieced together a sketch of the mysterious man seen walking away with her. The drawing showed a young man, and police blasted the image across Sonoma County and beyond, desperate for anyone in the community to recognize his face. But despite flooding the public eye, no solid names came in, not then, and not in the long years after. His identity remains a ghost, a massive roadblock standing between this case and justice. Why he strangled her is still a mystery. No evidence or witness ever revealed a motive. Her missing clothes at the scene hinted at a dark, secondary motive beyond her murder, but severe decomposition made it impossible for forensics to prove what happened before she died. Finding her body dumped off Highway 101 near Petaluma meant she was moved from Santa Rosa, where she vanished. This meant the killer either had a car or knew the local footpaths incredibly well. The tragic case also exposed a massive bias in how the media and police treat victims from different backgrounds. Her sister, Angleturna, has fought for answers for decades. She remembers, she practically raised me. She was like a mother to me. Angel's relentless fight kept the mystery in the news, but even the fresh headlines failed to spark any real leads. In April 2025, a local newspaper demanded a fresh push for justice, urging police that no murder case should ever be forgotten, no matter how much time passes. A $50,000 reward stands for any tips leading to the arrest and conviction of her killer. This cash bounty is one of the largest ever seen in Northern California cold cases. While it hasn't sparked the breakthrough that detectives desperately need, the sheriff's office keeps the file active, waiting to test the evidence with next-generation forensic tools. Today, that faded composite sketch is still their strongest clue. Even though nearly 30 years have passed, making it incredibly hard to track down anyone who saw that mystery man in August 1997. Still, preserved DNA from her remains could unlock the truth through modern genetic genealogy. They just need a matching profile to link back to the sketched suspect. Because no other strangulations happened nearby, detectives believe the killer was either a one-time offender or was chillingly good at hiding his crimes. Her family still fights for closure, knowing how hard it is when crucial evidence has been lost to time and decay, and when their prime suspect remains a nameless shadow. Let's look at another case where brushing with celebrity culture completely derailed investigations. Christa Helm. On February 12, 1977, young actress Christa Helm was found dead on a sidewalk in West Hollywood near her agent's home on Lloyd Place, ambushed just moments after parking her car. She was the victim of a wild, frenzied attack that screamed pure hatred rather than a cold hit. The medical examiner found between 22 and 23 stab wounds all over her body, along with severe blunt force trauma, proving the killer had used more than one weapon. Such extreme violence pointed to a deeply personal grudge, completely ruling out a random robbery. Helm had chased her dreams all the way from Milwaukee to Los Angeles, determined to make it big. She landed small television parts and modeled on the side while waiting for her one big break. She ran in circles packed with powerful players from the Hollywood establishment. From famous actors to studio executives and big producers, this massive web of connections would soon sit at the very heart of the murder investigation. But the biggest breakthrough during the search was Helm's private diaries and audio recordings. These allegedly detailed her affairs with various celebrities, and detectives believed these materials, filled with detailed accounts of secret affairs, gave someone the ultimate motive to silence Helm before the truth went public. While Helm's famous Black Book and key recordings had vanished, detectives did recover some diaries listing the names of high-profile stars, but those leads never led to an arrest. There was zero physical evidence linking those names to the street-side attack that took her life. Before her death, Helm had shared dark fears with her friends. One postcard she mailed literally read, "I am in way over my head here," suggesting she realized she was in danger from her secret relationships or other shady activities. This letter showed investigators that Helm was fully aware of the threats against her, although she never specified exactly who or what she feared in any surviving writings. Soon, two key figures emerged as major persons of interest in the case. Patty Collins, one of Helm's close associates, vanished right after the attack and was never found. Her sudden disappearance, combined with her ties to Helm's inner circle, sparked massive suspicion, though zero physical evidence actually tied her to the crime scene. Rudy Masella, another associate, reportedly made statements suggesting he knew about or helped cause Helm's death, but police could not back up those claims with forensics or reliable eyewitnesses, and neither Collins nor Masella was ever formally charged, and Collins's ongoing disappearance means detectives still cannot question her today. Between 2006 and 2008, detectives reopened the cold case to re-interview Helm's old social circle. They questioned actors, old roommates, and family members, including her sister Marissa, who pointed to jealousy as a motive, along with other associates who might have kept secrets back in 1977. This fresh push revealed new details about Helm's complex life and relationships, but it failed to yield the forensic evidence needed to finally charge a suspect. Most theories still focus on those missing diaries and their power to ruin reputations and expose secrets that elites wanted buried. Her deep ties to Hollywood made the entire investigation incredibly messy, as nervous witnesses hesitated to share what they knew about their elite friends or their own behavior. The brutal overkill suggested a crime of pure passion or panic rather than a cold, calculated hit, but the theft of her diaries proved someone planned to cover their tracks. In March 2025, a new podcast episode re-examined the mystery, exploring the theories and suspect profiles that have haunted this case for nearly 50 years. Officially, it remains open with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Though any active investigation is now limited because so many original witnesses and suspects have died since 1977, the missing diaries and tapes prevent detectives from using modern forensics to scan for hidden fingerprints, DNA, or other trace evidence left behind by the person who took them. A similarly bizarre mystery would soon unfold inside the city's avant-garde music scene. Peter Ivers. On March 3, 1983, beloved musician and television host Peter Ivers was found dead in his downtown Los Angeles loft. He was the victim of brutal, repeated blows to the head, delivered by what police believed was a hammer or some other heavy tool. The crime scene raised immediate questions. Did Ivers actually know his killer, or did someone force their way inside? Because his loft sat in an area packed with eccentric artists and musicians, countless people potentially knew his daily routine and where he lived. Ivers was born on September 20th, 1946 in Illinois, spending his earliest years in Chicago until his father's death in 1949 forced a family move. After spending a short time in Arizona, the family settled in Brookline, Massachusetts, where Ivers grew up from age 4. He showed incredible academic talent studying classical languages at Harvard University, while also chasing the musical passions that would define his life. His sharp intellect blended with raw musical talent, carving a unique space in both college and showbiz circles. By the early 1980s, Ivers made a name for himself hosting New Wave Theater, a cable show highlighting rising punk and new wave bands. His wild personality and open door for bizarre acts made the show a massive hit in underground music circles, even if mainstream success remained completely out of reach. Straddling the line between underground cool and mainstream dreams, Ivers crossed paths with some very strange characters, including highly erratic people struggling with the heavy drug habits of the 80s music scene. The forensic evidence told a dark story, showing a brutal, relentless attack with multiple blows to Ivers' skull that ultimately took his life. Private Eye David Charbonneau studied the case and remarked, "I do not believe it was a break-in, which meant Ivers likely let the killer in himself, or they had a key from some past connection. There were no defensive wounds on Ivers' hands, suggesting the savage beating began entirely without warning, leaving him unable to fight back before blacking out. David Jove, who worked with him on the show, quickly became a key suspect because of what friends and police called a deeply hostile relationship with Ivers. Rumors swirled about massive fights over who ran the show and how the money was split. While these arguments had never turned violent before Ivers was killed, the bad blood was hard to ignore. Jove swore he was innocent and faced no charges, yet whispers from Ivers' friends never stopped. Joe passed away in 2004 without ever being officially accused. Let's consider that, even today, investigators still only have theories. Ideas range from a work dispute gone wrong, to a robbery in his loft, to drama within Ivers' wild social circle in the chaotic Los Angeles music scene. Such a brutal, prolonged beating suggested pure rage or a dark resolve to finish the job, ruling out a warning or a threat that simply went too far. Police eventually determined the murder weapon was a heavy, industrial-strength gaffer's tape dispenser or some other heavy studio tool, supporting the theory that this was a sudden attack of opportunity using whatever was lying around the loft. But the crime scene was heavily contaminated before police arrived, making any forensic analysis nearly impossible. Too many people walked through the loft after finding Ivers' body, which likely ruined physical evidence and left behind trace materials that completely threw off later tests. This mess, paired with the limited forensics of the early 1980s meant any DNA or trace clues were either ruined or completely invisible to the technology of that era. A podcast investigating the mystery was produced in 2023, talking to surviving friends and combing through case files built up over 40 long years. While shows like the LA Report have covered this tragedy, the most detailed look remains the 2008 biography by Josh Frank, which pushed the LAPD to reopen the file in the late 2000s, though the 1983 scene was just too messy to fix. Even with all this fresh attention, no new forensic clues have surfaced to name Ivers' killer. The file stays open with the Los Angeles Police Department, but the trail has gone cold as old leads dry up and key witnesses grow old and pass away. Yet, another cold case would finally see movement after decades of silence. Asha Degree. On February 14, 2000, a young girl from Shelby, North Carolina, not California, but included because, as you and I know, it dominates mystery discussions, she vanished after leaving home in the dead of night. Drivers traveling down Highway 18 in a blinding rainstorm spotted her walking by the road. It was a bizarre, chilling sight given the weather and the late hour. When drivers pulled over to help, she ran back into the dark woods along the highway. It was a bizarre reaction that completely baffled both the witnesses and the detectives later on. Asha was known by her family and teachers as a shy, quiet girl who feared dogs, storms, and the dark, which is why her slipping away into a midnight storm made absolutely no sense to anyone who knew her. It sparked dark theories. Had she been tricked by someone she trusted, or was she running from something at home? Her parents took lie detector tests and were quickly cleared. Detectives found nothing in her home life that would make her run. In 2001, her backpack was found wrapped in trash bags off Highway 18, 26 miles from where she vanished. The distance suggested her bag was taken there by car, not carried on foot, and the plastic wrapping meant someone had gone out of their way to protect or hide it. Inside were her personal belongings, but they offered very few real clues back then. DNA technology in the early 2000s just wasn't ready yet. For nearly 25 years, it remained a standard missing persons case, despite there being absolutely no credible sightings of her since February 2000. In September 2024, police officially upgraded the case to a homicide, bringing in massive new resources and a whole new strategy. This major break came from breakthroughs in testing the DNA preserved on her backpack and other evidence from the early days of the search. Unsealed court documents from late 2024 and early 2025 revealed that DNA on Asha's undershirt and her trash bag-wrapped backpack matched Roy Dedman and Russell Underhill, both now deceased, leading investigators to suspect Underhill was involved in the initial encounter. These DNA matches forced investigators to shift their focus onto the Deadman family, with Roy, Connie, and their daughters emerging as key persons of interest. Search warrants were soon executed at Deadman Family Properties in April 2025, looking for clues to explain how Asha's belongings got mixed with Deadman family DNA. Authorities also found text messages that allegedly contain admissions of involvement or knowledge about what happened to Asha. Even though the precise details of these texts remain hidden from the public by law enforcement, they were reportedly sent between Deadman family members and could offer vital circumstantial proof about what happened after Asha disappeared from Highway 18. By late 2025, though no formal murder charges had been filed, Roy Dedman was officially named as the prime suspect in her abduction and murder, as detectives pored over more than 40 electronic devices seized from his properties. Why Asha left her home and how she truly vanished remains a mystery, despite these recent explosive breakthroughs. Theories span from predatory grooming by someone she met at school or community groups, to a sudden chance encounter with the Deadman family that spiraled out of control, to a planned kidnapping where the little girl was lured away using false promises and artificial trust. Still, her mother, Aquila Degree, has kept her faith, saying, "I believe she's still alive." Even though the murder investigation suggests that detectives have secret evidence pointing to a darker end, a $45,000 reward is still active for any real answers, though police seem close to making arrests on their own, without needing outside tips. In this next case, investigators faced a dark puzzle. Did nature or a human predator end a young life. Michelle von Emster. In 1994, the body of 25-year-old Michelle von Mester was found floating near Sunset Cliffs in San Diego, California, covered in severe injuries that sparked an immediate debate over whether she was killed by a predatory animal or a human. Michelle's left leg was completely gone, with the bone severed in a clean, chilling separation right at her femur. The San Diego medical examiner officially ruled her death a shark attack, a ruling that still stands on her death certificate today, despite serious challenges from top experts like Ralph Collier and David Charbonneau. Michelle had survived cancer earlier in life, but lived with trauma, including documented abuse from religious figures. She struggled with substance abuse and lived a transient life around San Diego, working occasionally in an art store while crashing in temporary spots. These unstable habits brought her close to dangerous people, stripping away the normal routines that might have kept her safe. But the autopsy of Michelle's remains revealed dark secrets that shattered the shark theory. Sand filled her lungs, meaning she had breathed in beach sand while alive, proving she was breathing on the shore, not drowning out in the deep water. Expert Ralph Collier pointed out that her femur bone snapped cleanly, arguing it made no sense given the sawing action of a great white's razor teeth, yet the examiner insisted the spiral fracture was caused by the sheer force of a massive predator. Forensics showed she was alive during the attack, ruling out damage done by crabs or sea currents. Shark expert Ralph Collier, after reviewing the files, stated, "The break on Michelle's leg was not consistent with that of a shark attack, validating skeptics everywhere." He pointed out that real shark attacks leave clear bite marks, distinct tooth scratches, and deep crushing wounds entirely missing from Michelle's battered body. Without these telltale signs, her severed leg pointed toward a far more sinister explanation that demanded a real investigation. Soon, two suspicious figures emerged who had been chillingly close to Michelle right before her death. Edwin Decker, a local writer who ran in the same San Diego circles as Michelle, quickly drew police suspicion, though zero physical evidence ever tied him to her death. Detectives also investigated an anonymous stalker who had shown a dangerous obsession with Michelle. His identity remains a secret, and this line of inquiry ultimately led to no charges. If a killer was involved, the motive remains a mystery. Some suspect she was killed in an argument, with the culprit staging the scene to look like a shark attack. Others believe she knew too much, or that her drug habits put her in the path of cold-blooded predators. That wet sand inside her lungs strongly suggested she lay helpless on the beach, completely paralyzed or tied down, while her horrific injuries were inflicted by someone under the cover of darkness. Officially, her cause of death remains a mystery, left permanently open as undetermined rather than an accident. This open ruling highlights the clashing evidence without choosing between the predator in the sea and the one on land. The war between nature and murder has divided sleuths and marine biologists for over 30 years, with absolutely no consensus in sight. Recent coverage on BuzzFeed Unsolved and hit podcasts has kept this cold case alive in the public mind. Yet no smoking gun has ever emerged to prove whether a monster or a beast killed her. San Diego authorities still keep the file open, refusing to close the book on Michelle. Even though the trail is cold, and the world may never truly know what happened during Michelle's final, terrifying hours on Sunset Cliffs. That is her story. Thanks for watching. Click right here to explore another mystery.